right, so with no further ado, I will click past this page. This will just give you an idea. This is me. I'm Robert Frere, and I've been working with the Alteryx enablement team for a few years now. Been certified in different aspects of Alteryx on the designer and server side. I have a big background with database design, the data warehousing, reporting, business intelligence type of thing. And so I worked with a variety of companies, as you can see, from telecom to media and finance. And so I enjoy data, enjoy warehouses, and I think that you'll enjoy getting to know Alteryx's intelligence suite even more. All right, so just a quick agenda for what we're going to look at. Just going to take a little bit of a review over some stuff that we talked about last week. If you missed last week's webinar, we went over a lot of the base tools that are part of Intelligence Suite. I got some questions, some feedback from that, so I'm going to go back and review a little bit of that as we're moving forward. Going to make sure we focus there on the sentiment analysis, as well as taking a little bit more time with the machine learning review. Ran over that a little bit quickly last time. And then some of the new features or new tools that are there in the machine learning section. So we're going to be going over those topics today. All right, so the PDF image processing. I'm just going to jump right into Alteryx Designer for this so that I can show you what is going on and what what we did a little bit last time, and then also some additional capabilities that are available in the image and computer vision, actually, is what they call it, section. All right. So don't want to get all the way back from the start, but what we did last time, based on the Intelligence Suite tools, actually, I want to make sure that I set the scenario a little bit. Is I'm in version of Designer 2021.2, so this is the latest version, and with this latest version, the Intelligence Suite underwent a little bit of a change where now there are the tools that are part of the image processing, which are part of the PDF processing, that those are now in a separate palette called computer vision. And so last time what we did is we went ahead and we built in a PDF. We brought in a PDF. We set a template by annotating the various columns that we're trying to pull out of here. And so as we did that, we can see we have a name for each one. We've got number of licenses, expanding, activity, tenure, etc. And then we also connected the image input, which is the directory where all the images that we want to process are in. So we have an individual template, the directory for the processing, and then the image to text tool will actually do the processing. And when we do that processing, we receive the data coming out of here, so into the select tool. You'll see that it gives me my path, my file, and then for every annotated field, we receive all the data that it read from the various inputs. So in this case, I had 35 records that we read in. I've got a company, industry, tenure, etc. Now you'll notice here that we had embedded cells, new lines in here. So sometimes when you're going through and you're setting up your annotations, you're going to get a little bit of clutter in your data. And so with these tools, you would just handle them just like you would any other type of Alteryx data input. So I've added a data cleansing tool here. And this data cleansing tool, we were looking for new lines as well as leading and trailing spaces. After it went through the data cleansing tool, you can see that it cleaned up our data for us. But at this point, when we brought the data in, because we were reading it from a PDF, everything comes in as a string. So we added our auto field tool to get our data types. And when we do that, then we see that we have our various columns that we pulled from our PDF, and we have all the information for each of those including numeric columns, booleans for true, false, etc. on here. All right, so that's what we covered last time. I wanted to make sure that I indicated something else that came in on a question. That has to do with the type of processing that Alteryx is doing when you use these image processing tools. Because it's an image, the underlying data is not text-based. So that's the idea with these, with the PDF, the image readers that we have here, is that you can take actual pictures, JPEGs, PNG files, and actually use optical character recognition to take that data and to make it into string data that you can bring into Alteryx. But OCR, or optical character recognition, has some limitations. Sometimes if there's not a good contrast, or if things are a little blurry, you can have problems bringing that data in. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that sometimes, many times, when you are bringing in your data, you can look to see if that PDF that you're bringing in is primarily text-based. So if it's text-based, then what you can do is, there are other tools other than the Intelligence Suite. There are other tools that are available that help you to process those. For instance, what I did is I went to the Alteryx public gallery and I pulled in this tool called a PDF reader. Now, in this section down here, I'm going to open up, what I did is I've included the PDF reader, pointed it to one of my PDF documents that we looked at over here. And then when I run this workflow, what I end up doing is I get the data pulled out by individual line in my PDF. So this is some of that same information that we have earlier, right? So then my first step here in the configuration, you'll see, is that I split the text, which came in as a single, apologize for that, came in as a single cell. And when you looked at the details of this, we could see that the data all came in from this PDF into one cell. So the first thing I did is use the text to column tools to split out to rows based on the new line delimiter. And when I did that, it pulls it into 7 or 8 additional rows here. Now, once I do that, I still have my data inside here. So I'm going to do a little bit of more processing. So I can take this workflow. I'm going to use the sample tool to come down here and say, because I'm looking at my data coming in, and when I look at this data, I see that I've got the first row is my title of my PDF. I don't really need to keep that part of the data, but you'll see all the rest of the data has a colon in between the name of the field and then the actual value in the field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first use this sample tool to skip the first row so that I don't need the PDF title in here. And then I'm going to go back to my parsing tools, go to my text to column tool, and then with the colon as the delimiter, I'm going to say that there are 2 columns here and run this value again. And when I run this, it'll go ahead and do the processing. You'll see that it takes a little bit of time as it's going through. So if you have larger amounts of PDFs, you want to be careful with what you're doing. Make sure that you have enough time to run all those. All right, so now when I pull this secondly, I'll see that I have both the company information and the actual data that I'm looking at. All right, and then if I take that an additional step, what I can do is I can go in here and use the crosstab tool, because if I wanted to grab this data, I can crosstab it. All right, in this case, we're going to make the change column header, that column that's called number 1 right here, and the actual values are in 2. we'll make concatenating the aggregating value. And this time I'm going to go ahead and cache this so you don't have to wait each time for it to run. But what it'll do then is it'll go ahead and take that data and flip it for us so that you can see that after we've done this, we pull in that data, and now I've got my different column headers. I've got activity level, company, customer tenure, customer win. All of that data is now here, and now I can change. I can do an auto field tool and a data cleansing tool to get rid of any of the extraneous spaces, and also again put in the auto field tool so we get the right data types. And when we do that, actually, sorry, I want to put those on the other side of this. So let me grab them over here. Paste that there. All right. And then I'll just go ahead and connect these again. All right, so now that I clean these up a little bit, I'll run it again. And when we finish up here, you notice then that our data that we get from here is going to be very similar to what we did before. It looks like I need to get rid of one more thing here. I've got that data, make sure I apply it to all my columns so that it actually will clean up my data set. And now my data is in good shape here. So my bottom line on this one was to let you know that you don't have to use the Intelligence Suite tools to do PDF inputs. If your PDFs are text-based, you can get the tools from the public gallery or other places, pull that data in and treat it as text. All right. Now, in addition, I wanted to take this opportunity to show you an additional feature that is new with Intelligence Suite in the computer vision area. And that is that in addition to annotating strings and images that you get from your image input, you can also bring in and annotate tables. So the way that you would do that is much like what we did before. We would bring in an image template. And from the image template, we can navigate to open a file and find the workflow that we're going to the PDF file that we're going to get. I'm going to pull this in here. I'm going to grab this one. Now, when I bring this in, we'll notice that this is a rather simple PDF, but it's got an embedded table in here, right? So instead of trying to make my annotations for each of these columns separately, what I can do is I can do my annotation around the entire table. So I select the entire table, do the lasso thing around the entire table here, and then I'm going to put this in input data. And you'll notice here that the annotation type defaults to string, but I can come down here and I can, this is new to 2021.2, there's a table data type. So bringing that table in here and I hit save. All right, so now that's going to annotate where I'm grabbing this from. And then if I use my image input tool over here, we can then navigate to that. In our case, we're going to go to that save directory, but if you had more than just this one PDF with that table, you would grab them individually and navigate there. I'm going to grab this webinar workflow. All right, I'm going to grab that. So now that I've got those two together, I can bring in my image to text tool, connect it to my data and to my template. Again, zooming in on here so you can see the input anchors of the tools. We have a D input for data and a T for the template. We're going to select the image coming in over here. All right, and then I'll put a browse tool after the end. So then when I run this, All right, you'll notice then that when we pull this in, oh, looks like I had something else that I'm going to grab there. So let me go back here, and I'm going to include just PDFs. So I'll run it again. We've got an extra row in there that we didn't actually need to process this time, so I had another image in that directory. All right, so in this case, you'll see my input data column is got the output here. Now, when we double click here and we examine that data that's underlying, let me zoom in at this spot. What you can do is you can see that it grabbed it told me the number of columns that are in my table, and then it pulled in all the data from my various columns that I had in here. All right, so now that we have the data here from that table, we can bring it in just like we would in other types of workflows, right? As a matter of fact, it's similar to what we had done before. I can bring in the text to column tool and bring it into a split it out to the rows with a \n for the new lines. So then when I bring in that data, right, we'll see that it comes out over here. And I'm gonna close the rest of this down a little bit so we don't take up extra time. All right, so now you can see here that when I break open the data, now coming out of here, I've got my input data stream. Oh, on my text to column tool, I chose the wrong column. Of course, I got to choose the right column for it to process properly. That often happens to me when I'm going fast. All right, so now you'll see that the data gets split out into these different places. You can then use the same tools to pull them into pieces. I'll just do one more step here, and then the rest you can take care of, on your own as you pull in the data set. In this case, I've got 5 different columns that I'm pulling it out to. One last run here, and we'll see then that our data that we pull from this table that was in this PDF, we'll now have access to all of that data. What did it do? Oh, I did it the same thing again. I brought it in with path, and I needed to bring it in with the input data column. Apologize for that. Last run. And so now that I've pulled in this data, now that data that was in the PDF document, right, and it can be any type of image that was brought in. Now that table information is text data in my Alteryx workflow, and then from this point, I can do whatever I need to manipulate this data and bring it into the format that we will finally need. All right, now. Want to make sure at this point, are there any questions that I can address? Or Carlos, if you're online, did you see any questions that you think might be helpful to the larger group?
Hi, Robert. Thank you for joining this meeting, and I'm here. If necessary, some help, I'll be there.
All right. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the panel Q&A, and Carlos can help you answer those questions. So and then again, if he'll let me know if there's any of those questions that it would be good for us to answer on a whole. All right. So I wanted to make sure you saw the table input feature, which is new in 2021.2. As well as that you were aware of that you can use text-based PDF inputs if you've got text-based input PDFs that you need to bring into Alteryx. The OCR will work on those as well, but sometimes it'll be simpler to use the PDF, especially if the resolution isn't great. You'll get better performance from PDFs. But if you have a wider variety of data sets or images and that type of thing, the OCR part of Intelligence Suite works very well for that. All right, so let's jump back over to the PowerPoint for just a bit. So we talked about, next thing we're going to look at is we're going to go into the sentiment analysis section. So this is part of text mining. And these are the tools. Last time we spent a good amount of time looking at the word cloud piece here, and we brought in the word clouds and also a mask for them, so you can use images as background images that you can fill in with your word cloud. And so in this section, we're going to spend some time looking at the sentiment analysis tool, as well as the topic modeling tool, so that we can see how you can use those to help your company organize the data that they're getting, maybe from social media, maybe from surveys being sent out and requested back. All of that can be addressed with the sentiment analysis and topic modeling. All right, so looking at the other tool that's in this group is the text pre-processing. I wanted to just make sure we looked at that a little bit, and this is the idea that a lot of times when customers or internal business units are providing data for you, there will be a lot of words in there, like the words the and maybe even if it's about Alteryx, the word Alteryx. The word Alteryx in your data doesn't really help you gain too much of an idea of whether people are feeling positive or negative about what you've done. So with the text pre-processing, you can designate words that you do not want to be included in the sentiment analysis, and it'll clean up a lot of that and take care of it. So especially like on your word clouds and your topic modeling is where you would use this text pre-processing. And the sentiment analysis, I think one of the things I'll point out here is that with the sentiment analysis, you have it has one algorithm right now, this Vader, which is not referencing Star Wars, but it's actually a Valiance Aware Dictionary for Sentiment Reasoning. So it's a industry understood algorithm that will go in and try to look for positive words, negative words, and give you an idea of what people are thinking when they're writing in their survey values. And it also gives you some additional information that you can put in, whether you want the sentiment to be on individual word level or at a sentence level. So if you want to see if the sentences that they're using are positive, you can select the option to find the sentiment at a sentence level. Max min classifications, right? So for different groups, do you need the sentiment to be 90% positive in order for it to be considered a positive sentiment, or do you want to be real generous and say if anything over 50% positive, it becomes a positive sentiment? You can change those values as well. All right, and then we're going to just a little bit more here. Some of the things you have to make sure that you do some data checking on is since this is machine algorithm based, it's going to have some problems with things like sarcasm. If somebody said sarcastically, this training is great, and they didn't really mean that, it's going to be hard for sentiment analysis to understand that was actually a negative sentiment. So you need to look at the words you use there and make sure that is taken into account when you're doing your analysis. Also, some other types of language, figurative language. The Alteryx algorithms are going to not be able to manage all of that when trying to give you a positive or negative sentiment. All right, and then finally here we're going to go over the topic modeling piece. And in the topic modeling piece right now, what I'm going to focus on is that there are two sections. There are interactive charts and word relevance summary, that are two different types of reports that you can pull out of the topic modeling to pull down that information. Different things here about how often words are used, as well as on the LDA side of things, we're going to see that, actually, I'm going to shift forward one here. And these are some more technical pieces that you can look at under LDA options. We got alpha and ETA. So the alpha, the larger value means that you'll have more topics per data entry that you have. Lower values are going to be fewer topics, so it'll make things more concentrated. If you have a lower alpha value, a higher alpha value, you're going to look for more relevance within different topics. And on the ETA, a larger value requires more similar words before the topic is created. And if it's a lower ETA, then you can fewer uses of that word will be needed before Alteryx makes it into its own topic. So those could get very technical. What I would suggest for you is to use your data, see what you get right off the bat, and then you can slowly make modifications to these additional options as you're going through. All right, so let's then jump from here. Let's go back into Alteryx, and so let's look at what we have on the sentiment analysis side. All right, so back here, we're going to flip over to a new workflow, and we're going to look at our sentiment analysis. So to do this, what I want to do is I'm going to grab some data that I have over here, input data tool, and I'm going to paste it right here so we can look. So this is some customer survey information that we have received, and we want to do some processing of it. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go to my text mining area, and you'll see that we have the text pre-processing tool. So if I drop that tool on, connect it to my text pre-processing tool. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see it. All right, now you'll notice here that it needs to select a language. So it needs to know in what language is your data coming back in, so that you can it can recognize if we're talking about English words, Spanish words, etc. All right, and then here, which is the text field that we're actually going to do some calculations on. So here it's going to be the description, because that's the only text field that we really have in our data set. All right, so those, it's going to look here. And then there's some options that we see right off the bat. We've got whether we want to filter out any punctuation, or the stop words are like the and etc. And then we have any digits. So if you care, if numbers are not important to your analysis, you can select that as well. And any additional stop words can be done here. Now, I will point out that there's a second input anchor that is a part of the text pre-processing. And what this one does is it allows you to, if you have a file that has a bunch of stop words, maybe you've been doing this analysis for a while, and there are a listing of stop words that you want to make sure that are removed during the text pre-processing, you could bring in a text input tool, put in the various words that you don't want to have used here. If we want to say Alteryx, training, those kind of words, if we didn't want to include them, we would set those up here, and then we would bring that into our stop word input anchor, and then those would be taken into account when we're looking at our output. All right, now, so this is run in this situation. I'm going to go ahead and put a browse tool after here. We run this, and then it goes through my survey results. It looks at our values, and then we get another column here where the data was processed before it came to us. All right, so now that we have the text pre-processing done, let's look at the sentiment analysis tool. So if I come back here to text mining, grab my sentiment analysis tool, I'm going to drop it here in my workflow. Now, when we do this one, we also are going to choose the language. So here it is for English. We're using that Vader algorithm. Again, in the future, there may be more algorithms, but right now that's the one algorithm that's there. And then this is key here is what field are we going to be doing sentiment analysis on? Now, if you want to do sentiment analysis on our processed data, then you would use the descriptions processed. But one of the recommendations I've seen is that when you're doing sentiment analysis, you often want to use all the words that are involved because those can be more helpful in describing what the sentiment is. So I'm going to use the not the pre-processed part, but the data that it was before being pre-processed. All right, so now when I do this, we're going to run this and then I'm going to show you some of the options that come with the sentiment analysis. What we can do is when we run this, we're going to calculate our values out. And as a matter of fact, next time I run it, I'll cache it so we don't wait that additional step. We'll see here on the output is that we see any negative sentiment, neutral sentiment, and positive sentiment. And then we've got a compound sentiment score. So now this, we see that this is overall 0.44 positive. This one is 0.63, 0.38. All right, so if you wanted to just have the score where you can then classify them yourself in your workflow, you could leave it like this. But if we go back to the sentiment analysis, you may want to output a categorical sentiment. So if I click on this checkbox, then I set my classification level. So if I want the minimum positive classification to be, I'm going to say 0.7, what it's going to do is then this compound sentiment value will have to be over 7 in order for it to be seen as a positive sentiment. So I'm going to put that there. I'm going to go ahead and cache at this point here, and then it will go ahead and run for us, and we'll see the additional column that will include at this point our overall classification. So now we see we've got neutral, we've got positive values here, we have negative values as well, So you see that you now can have a single column that'll give you the values, the overall category of whether people were positive, negative, or neutral. And if you don't like some of the values, you can come back here and you can change the things so that, say, that you needed to be more negative in order for it to be called negative, right? Then it will change the overall sentiment coming out of here. All right, so that's what these values here are for. Anywhere from -1 to 1 is going to be your range of values. And now this is going to make it harder to be negative, and more things are going to end up neutral. If you make this number higher, then you're going to have more negative, more positive, and less neutral. So whatever it is that you're looking for in your particular output. All right, so that's the pretty much what the sentiment analysis will give you. Gives you positive, negative, and the overall category sentiment. All right, now let's look at the next section, which is the topic modeling. So the topic modeling, it can get a little bit technical. So I'm gonna show you what is available here, and there are some videos that are available online to help give you some more information. But it can be a little bit confusing. But I think that if you take some time to run your data through here, you'll start to see uh, uh, the ways to use these topics analysis. All right, I'm going to choose my field. This time I'm going to use the processed field for my topics because that'll get rid of any extraneous words. Number of topics. So this, when I first saw topics, I always thought that it was something that I would decide, right? I would decide that what types of topics they have. But what these tools do is you just tell it the number of topics, and then it does the analysis on what words are used, and it pulls them into different groups for you. So in this case, let's say that we're going to use 3 topics. All right, and on this particular option, we're going to use the interactive charts, and we'll leave everything else here as normal at this point, or as the default settings. And I'm going to go ahead and put a browse tool behind each one of these. All right, now let me zoom out a little bit so it doesn't look so cluttered in there. Now on the second one, what I'm going to do is we're also going to use the process descriptions, and we'll use the 3 topics here, but this time we're going to do the word relevance summary. So in this one, we're going to see a different output from our interactive, I'm sorry, the interactive chart. Yeah. So pull that down there. Let's grab these guys a little bit lower. All right. So now, if we run this, what we will see is that then it'll go ahead and do the process. And then let's look at the different anchors that are on the output side of this. So when we're doing the topic analysis here, topic modeling, the top output anchor is a D, which tells us it's the data. So what it's telling us here then is that it created the 3 topics that we were looking for, and then it's got a score for each of these topics. Now those scores that are here for the topics are giving us an indication of how strongly this entry fed into that topic. And so the closer we are to 0, the greater the strength is of that particular topic for the overall value. Now, again, when I look at this, if I haven't spent much time of it, it's a lot of numbers. It may be hard to figure out what it is, but I think if we look at the interactive chart, the reporting tools that we have here, we're going to see more value out of this. So if I click on the R output anchor, right, this is my interactive report, and here you'll see something that probably makes a little bit more sense to us is that we see that the 3 topics were defined, and then you see a listing of the words that are being used in this topic analysis, right? So we see overall there was a great frequency of people saying things were good, lot, class. All right, so in some of these you might decide, you know what, the word lot doesn't really help me very much, so maybe you go in here and add it to your list of stop words, and then that'll remove it from this report. But now that you see this report, you see that you have 3 different topics that were created. If you hover over one of these, you'll notice that the words that were used to create that topic. So I'm going to click here on the one, and there I'll see that class, enjoyed, excellent, hands, think, best, possible. These are the words that were most relevant to the first topic that was created. And then you can see here, you can go to the second one, and on the second one you see different words being used. All right, and then on the third you'll see the third set of values being used. So those are the 3 topics. You can get there by clicking on the individual circles that are part of this graph. Right now, also, if you want to just toggle through them, you can see that it's topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. You can look at that data there. All right. Then you have this relevance metric slider. Right. So in here, what you can do is you can slide this, and the more you slide it towards 0, the more you're going to show the use of those words in these particular topics. All right, so every time you slide it, you move, and you'll see there's a little 2 over here. This tells you that you can come down here to relevance, and it gives you the formula that it uses in determining that relevance. All right, now again, if you look at that and it doesn't make much sense to you, then there's more research to do as to what you can accomplish there. But That's your relevance score in here for your various topics. All right, now this interactive chart is the same data that's in our data set. It's just presented to us in what's a nicer format that gives us some more insight into what we're looking at. All right, then the second part here is the word relevance summary. All right, so on the word relevance summary piece, we have, again, our data set. So let's make this a little smaller. We have our data set, we have our topic information just like above. Here then, instead of having that interactive report, we see topic relevance 1, 2, and 3. So we see the word, and then we see what is its relevance to the topic, and also its saliency. So now to go back over those, because these ones can be a little bit hard unless we know the definition of these values. Saliency is a value that measures how strongly the related a term is to the topic. So this term is related to on the saliency to this topic based with a value of 0.021. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is the higher the saliency indicates more importance to defining the topic. So we see here that this word is rather, well, actually, given the rest of our values here, it looks like it's pretty highly important in the adoption of the various topics. All right, so we see 0.021 is higher than any of our other values. So as having that higher saliency, it indicates more importance to the definition of the topic. All right, now the relevance, which we see for each of our individual topics, what that is the lower the absolute value equals a stronger association. So we have negative values here, we have positive values, and so the closer it is to a 0 value, the stronger it's going to be. Actually, I'm sorry, the lower the absolute value is going to be strong. Yeah, so closest to 0, you're going to end up with the stronger associations. All right, so negative 3.4, if you take the absolute value of that, that's 3.4. So that means for topic 1, the term good is not very strongly relevant to the overall topic, but you can see that there are other ones where we have a negative 1.7 or 1.4. Those are going to be stronger indicators of relevance to that topic. So those are our data from our topic modeling tools that come out here. All right. Then what I want to do here is I want to go to the machine learning side of things, and I want to bring in a couple of things for us to look at. And one of those has to do with bringing our data from our individual workflows. And I'm going to grab a couple of data sets here, drop them in to this workflow so we don't have to go look for them. Then what we're going to do is I want to show you here the assisted modeling in a little bit more detail than I did last time. So I'm going to grab the assisted modeling tool. I've got my training data set here. And when it comes back, I'm going to connect those two together. All right. Now, when you connect them together, the first thing that the assisted modeling tool is going to tell you is you need to run the workflow so it can read all the columns and the data that are in here. So we run the workflow. It then knows the columns, and then it tells us, okay, do you want to start assisted or expert? If you choose expert here, what it's going to do is then you will go in and grab the individual tools for features, fit, and the type of model, and you will build it yourself. So if you're very experienced with it, you can go the expert route. If you're not, you can do the assisted route. So we're going to start assisted modeling. And then here it will ask us what we're trying to do with this data set. I'm going to take this here in just a second. It'll come back. All right. So now it's telling me the information. What type of modeling am I going to do? So I'm going to start building here. Now, in my case, what I want to do is this data that I have is for customers that that we were able to retain from 1 year to the next. So retention is going to be the target. And because the answer is going to be yes or no here, this is going to be a classification type of predictive model. So you can see for under classification, we're looking for yes or no answers. So that's the kind that makes sense. If you've got other things where you're looking for numeric values to come out, the regression part will be good. So I'm going to go with retention. And classification says once you click on this, you can't back up on this particular tool. Now, in this one, we're going to go step by step so I can show you the various pieces that are involved here. So under step by step, what we'll see is the first thing you need to do is you're going to look at your data that you're going to make the model out of. Now, this data here is also referred to as features that you are looking at. Now, it recognized that the company name is just identification of the company, which really doesn't help you in predicting whether they're going to return or not. It's not like you can say, well, all the companies with the letter start with the letter A, I retain. That's not business-wise relevant. But it didn't know what to do with this ID column. It thinks that maybe that is a good value because it thinks it's a numeric value that would have something about the business. But I know that this ID is really the same as the company name. It's just an identifier. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to say this is an ID column. And when I do that, you'll see that these two features will not be part of the model that are created. The rest of these are numeric and categorical in these ones. So I'm going to leave those alone. You can see some information, glossary information over here if you want to look at more details. Now I'm going to hit next, and you will see that the next step is to look for missing values, because many of the models do not work if you do not. If you have nulls in your data set. Now my data set is fairly small, so I don't have any nulls. But if you did, or you had data that wasn't conforming to a predictive model, it would lead you through steps to say, okay, if you have a null value in this column, what do you want to do with that? Do you want to give it an average value? Do you want to give it a zero value? What do you want to do? So in this case, I don't have any problems, so I'm going to click on to next, and then I've got my different features here. It says, hey, it wants to remove my license feature or column as being relevant to whether they retain or not. I'm going to say, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to bring in licenses anyways because I don't think that the number of licenses will automatically, will incorrectly tell me whether somebody's retained or not. So I'm going to click on that one. Continue on to the next, and then you see the different types of models. It's giving me options of different models that I can try. So I'm going to go ahead and just let it try through all of these models. We're going to run there, and then it runs through each of the models. It checks out my values of the features to what the retention column that I chose. And you'll see here that as it runs through, it's got a pretty high level here because I had added that license thing back in. So if I had removed that one, we would have seen values more in the 93, 94. I can decide I want to test both the logistic regression and the XG boost. Those are the two models I'm going to use. I'm going to click here. And what it'll do then is it will go ahead and add the additional tools that are needed to create this model, and it will go ahead and configure those tools for me as well. All right, so now you see that we have created the XGBoost model as well as the logistic regression. I can then connect my data to these. So I'm going to say view possible connections. I'm going to connect to these two here. That'll connect them together. And when we connect these together, we can then run our workflow and it will take my data, produce the model, and then look at all my customer data and give me a prediction as to whether they will be retained or whether they'll sign a new contract or not. That's what that piece will let me know. All right. So this part, then we can see the values coming out. We can see the prediction value over here, whether they are predicted to be retained. We've got our trues, we've got our false based on the data that comes in. All right. Last thing I wanna look at here is that there's an additional tool that Alteryx has included with the intelligence suite here, and this one is the auto machine learning tool. Now, this one is different than the assisted modeling in that when it will create models on the fly. So what it'll do is, as your input data changes, it will change automatically the model that it uses to do its predictions. All right. So if I'm going to select my target over here. I've got my data coming in here, and actually, yeah. Oh, I know what I did here is I have to use a different column so that it will look over to my other piece here. Apologize. Let me grab that real quick. I'm just going to grab this whole thing over here to save us a little time. And all right, just to clean up the data a little bit, I'm changing the data type so that I can choose that I want retention as my target, and then I need a classification machine learning method. All right, so that's what I choose here. And then when I run this, what it does is it creates a model for us. All right, so that model can then be changed if I got more data coming in, it might change the model as to what's coming out. So that model is I have it saved as create model YXDB. All right. Then what you would do after that is you can take the data that's coming in, and what we're going to do is we're going to that model that was created here, we're going to bring it in to our predict tool. And our predict tool, we're going to connect it to the rest of our data. So I don't need to run this again because I saved that model under create model.yxdb. Right then, I choose the particular column that is into the model component here. So once it comes back, I'll zoom in a little bit, and we'll take a look at this. All right. So this is my new model that I created. I use my select tool to limit it to just the model coming into the predict tool. And then I added my data to my predict tool as well. And then when I run this part, it uses the model that was created with the auto machine learning tool, and it pulls this through, and then it tells me, based on the data it sees, how much of that do I see being retained and how much are going to be lost as customers. All right, so that's the new auto machine learning tool. So it's different than the assisted modeling in that instead of creating a static model, it'll go ahead and create it'll modify the model that it uses based on the data it reads in, and then when it creates that model, you can then use that model in future predictions going forward. All right. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to know when future videos are posted.